the first thing I want to talk about is the four pillars of exceptionalism as laid out in your book, A Patriot's History of the United States. And then we're going to drill down on one of them in particular. So let's start with that. What are the four pillars of American exceptionalism?
Well, when Mike Allen and I first wrote Patriot's History, we started around 1999, and our intention was to create a book that he and I could use in teaching our classes. We never thought it would go beyond that. In fact, we thought we were going to have to go to FedEx and get it, stapled and bound up, sell it out of the back of a van along with like plastic straws, Psst, buddy, plastic straws, Patriot's History of the United States.
Right.
But we got a publisher, and it did pretty well. What I noticed when I started work on a book about 6 years later called Patriot's History of the Modern World with Dave Doherty, he said, you guys did not really give a very good explanation in your first edition of American Exceptionalism. I thought about that. I go, you're right. We looked at that. So Dave and I spent a long time trying to figure out exactly what it was that made America exceptional. And what we came up with is called the four pillars of American exceptionalism. And it's important to understand this is from our founding. No other nation in history has had these four things from its founding. Most nations didn't have the first two I'm going to give you. So the first one is America was born with a Christian, mostly Protestant, religious tradition. Now, the reason that is important is not for matters of theology. It's important because the Puritans and Pilgrims who came over were congregational in their church governance, which is to say they were bottom up in church governance. No other religion in the world at that time was bottom up in church governance except for Protestants, and specifically the Puritans and the Pilgrims. So right away, that alone would have made America exceptional. But it's reinforced by the second pillar, which is common law, which comes over from the Germans to the English to America. And the Germanic tribes, who were not Christian, believed that their gods put the law in the hearts of men, and that men elected or selected leaders to carry out those laws. Again, bottom up. The rest of the world at this time was all top down. All of Europe was divine right of kings, top down. Islam, top down. Japan, top down. China, everybody else was top down. And here's this one group of Pilgrims and Protestants who have a bottom up common law structure. The third pillar, more nations had that, and that is private property with written titles and deeds. And the significance of the written titles and deeds is it leaves out almost all of Africa, some parts of Asia, which is you cannot grow a business using collateral if you don't have a written title and deed. This is Hernando de Soto's book, The Mystery of Capital. And then the last pillar is a free market economy. Now, when Dave and I wrote this, we thought, okay, that doesn't come till 1776. Wrong. Plymouth had started the free market economy in 1630 when they created a mill and paid somebody to run the mill while everybody else farmed the corn and wheat and so forth and brought it to the miller. So no nation on earth has all four of those from their origin, from their outset. And we peg American exceptionalism, this is very important for the 1619 Project people, we peg American exceptionalism from 1620 and Plymouth, not Jamestown and Virginia, because those people were different. They were Anglicans, top down, okay? They were run by England. They did not, the Mayflower, they elect their government right there on the boat. So Jamestown is not American exceptionalism. Plymouth is. And there are no slaves in Plymouth.
Fascinating. I was going to get to 1619. I appreciate you bringing it up right away. These four pillars, some of them, I'd say three of them ring common in my ear. Common law, private property rights, And I'm actually going to circle back to common law because it sounds like natural law to me. And then we'll go back to the
Right.
first one. So when you say that the laws of man were in the hearts, the Germans, and then they thought it was in their hearts. Where did it come from before that, though? Did they thought it came from their gods, but like Christian gods or pagan gods, or how did that work?
The Germans had pagan gods. However, this very line is in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, where God says, I will write my laws on your heart.
Gotcha. So whether or not they were pagan or Christian, it's a common theme, which is the laws. You can divine them. We're divine. Wrong word. You can figure them out. You can sort of reason
Yes.
you can reason your way to natural law, to the laws of men. Is that right?
Right. And the big difference is that under divine right, which became civil law under Napoleon, which conquered all of Europe under Napoleon and spread to as far as Egypt and all of the colonies, which basically have civil law, it's top down. God puts the law in the hand of the king and he tells everybody what to do. And this wasn't changed really officially in England till the Glorious Revolution, when finally it was Parliament that put the crown on William and Mary's heads, not an archbishop or a bishop.
Right. You know, I interviewed a one Alexander Dugin, a Russian philosopher, and he and I had a discussion about the United States being the first nation founded where the people had a direct connection to God without an intermediary. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why, again, Plymouth and the northern colonies are so much more representative of American exceptionalism than Jamestown, because they were still Anglican. And they were still, the people don't understand that the Anglican Church is not a Protestant church. Protestant meaning protesting against some aspect of doctrine. Only thing they were protesting against was Henry's right to have a hottie.
Right. Right. Anne Boleyn. Imagine that. What kind of power she had to change the future course of history in such a dramatic way. Shocking, actually, when you think about it. Okay, let's go back to number one. Christian tradition, Christianity in the United States. I was raised in very common public schools. Separation of church and state to me seems to have been taught as a way to keep the church out of government. But as I've been reading, and as I've been reading original texts from the founders, letters to each other, farewell addresses, the notes around state constitutions and their state constitution conventions, which is a huge, amazing resource of information for contemporary thinking around the founding of the federal constitution, is that maybe the church separation of church and state was actually to keep the state out of the church. It was my interpretation now is evolving to understand that separation of church and state was meant to create a more perfect church as well as a more perfect government. Is the United States of America a Christian nation? Was it founded by Christians? I have a tweet. It was very carefully worded. It said that the United States was founded by and for Christians and their children so that they can be better Christians and thus better Americans. Now, I got a ton of hate on that because people were reading into it. America is a Christian country. It was founded by Christians. Let's talk this through. What is your interpretation? What have you studied on this? Where do you land today? Has your thought on this changed over time, Larry? What do you think? Help me out. Help me understand this. And keep in mind,
Well,
I'm not a Christian. So I don't really have a horse in this race. I'm just very curious to understand.
Well, I took this up in a particular chapter in What Would the Founders Say? And I looked, as you did, at all the state constitutions and so forth. 5 of them mention Jesus Christ by name. All of them refer to God. The people who wrote this were virtually all Christians to one degree or another. People who say, well, the founders weren't Christian. The only one who was a deist, a pure deist, was Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Franklin believed in a interventionist God, but was not a Christian. George Washington was a devout Christian. There is a book out there called George Washington's Sacred Fire. I quit. It's a huge book, and I quit halfway through because he had made his point so overwhelmingly. I thought there's no sense even going on. And he pointed out that Washington was a vestryman, prayed in the name of Jesus, frequently took oaths in the name of Jesus. I mean, it's beyond question in my mind. So I would say you're mostly right about your framing of how the Constitution was to protect religion, with one caveat. I think it was meant to protect each state's religion against the religion of another state. Rhode Island was definitely founded to be a Baptist state. Maryland, even though it failed at this, was founded to be a Catholic state. Pennsylvania was founded to be the Quaker state. And of course, Massachusetts was to be the Puritan state. Many of the southern states were Anglican or Presbyterian. And the idea was they didn't want another sect coming in telling them how to do their Christianity. But they were overwhelmingly Christian, and they almost all, even if they weren't Christians themselves, saw their actions in terms of a Christian religion and a Christian-informed worldview. And I think if you've got your book of readings from Claremont, there's probably one there on the Christian elements of the American Revolution.